Listen to the sound of the rain, to this ambient hum that has crossed the expanses of time. The voice you are about to hear will offer you an unprecedented, profound resting place. A sanctuary your waking mind could never construct on its own. I know you are exhausted. It is a weariness buried deep within the architecture of your skull, lingering at the very frayed edges of your nerve endings. It is that scalding heat radiating just behind your closed eyes. This ancient method of descent, carrying a palpable physical weight, has already guided countless restless souls, those who, just like you, found themselves adrift in the dead of night toward an absolute, safe anchor. In the long journey ahead, your consciousness will unspool like a high-contrast black and white film negative, slowly revealing forgotten imagery within the developing fluid. You might encounter a simple-minded monk gripping a bamboo broom in the deep, resonant shadows of an ancient temple, a centipede lost in the autumn leaves, forgetting how to walk simply because it began to think, a desperate woman losing everything amidst the drifting ash of a charnel ground, and a white-haired guide who answers the universe's ultimate questions with an absolute breath. Catching silence. There is no need to be afraid. You might just allow those walls you've built to soften and perhaps give that tireless sentinel in your mind, the one constantly sounding the alarm, permission to step down just for a little while. Even if you have never tried any form of meditation before, even if your mind feels like a rusted yet jammed piece of machinery, grinding and screeching into the dark without ever stopping, even if you have exhausted every relaxation technique, every breathing exercise, and every loop of white noise in the world, only to jolt awake at 3 in the morning with an invisible hand gripping your chest. This force, this ancient wisdom spanning millennia, will still seep through your heaviest defenses like water-dissolving sand, carrying you softly, irrevocably downward. 2.5 millennia ago, beneath the faint shimmering silhouette of the Bodhi tree, the Buddha said, "The untamed mind is like a wild elephant. Only when the wild elephant is gentled does one find great peace." That wild elephant rampaging through the corridors of your skull doesn't need to be whipped. It doesn't need to be bound by heavy iron chains. It merely needs a night vast enough and dark enough for it to slow its own heavy steps. A shift is about to gently unfold over the next few minutes. You might notice a heavy, warm, leaden weight beginning to unspool, drifting down from the back of your neck inch by inch. Now, just allow yourself to settle in and get comfortable. Whether you are lying flat against soft woven fabrics or sinking deeply into the embrace of a chair, simply let your awareness drift toward that blurry boundary where your spine meets the surface beneath you. Notice how that line begins to soften and melt away. Take a deep breath, allowing the cool, heavy air to fill the tight spaces of your chest. And then, without holding anything back, surrender it all outwards, along with every heavy sigh. Your rest begins right here, deep within the ancient mountains of China. Perpetually locked in thick rolling fog, stood a centuries-old Zen temple. The corridors here were profound and steeped in amber gloom, where towering wooden pillars dragged long, ink-black shadows across the floorboards. This was an arena for the brilliant. Monks gathered from all corners of the world, debating the most impenetrable philosophies. Within the great hall, fierce arguments echoed endlessly. Debates on emptiness, on the illusion of self, on paradoxes unsolved for centuries. Here, intellect was the only currency. Whoever possessed the quickest mind and the sharpest tongue commanded the most respect, standing firmly in the shafts of faded light piercing the heavy dusk. But tucked away among these elites, haloed by their own intelligence, was a young monk. In the dimmest corners, the others would whisper behind his back, with a blend of pity and thinly veiled impatience, calling him Huinang the Fool. He was, truthfully, quite slow. As dense as an unpolished stone, no matter how finely the masters deconstructed the teachings, no matter how simple the metaphors the old abbot used, Huineng's mind was like a dried, fractured well. Nothing ever stayed. When the candlelight flickered in the lecture hall and the other scholars nodded in unison, their eyes gleaming with sudden insight as they offered piercing questions. Huineng could only shrink into the darkest back row. Illuminated by the trembling flame, his features would twist in absolute confusion and the painful strain of trying far too hard. His shoulders would rigidify, his hands gripping his robes in white-knuckled desperation. He tried with all his might to think, to comprehend, yet he couldn't even grasp the most fundamental threads of logic. When they chanted the Heart Sutra, the others could close their eyes and recite it flawlessly after a few passes. But Huineng would merely mumble, stuttering, words disjointed. His overstressed mind dissolving everything he had just heard into a blank, static white noise. The old abbot had watched this young man from the shadows for a long time. He saw the sheer torture Huineng endured at every single lecture. Some teachers privately suggested it would be kinder to let the boy return to the secular world. He would make a fine farmer or a carpenter. They reasoned, rather than burning his soul to ash here. But the old abbot remained silent. On a morning washed clean and glistening by heavy rain, the abbot called Huineng into the deep shadows of the corridor. Huineng, the abbot's voice was as still as water in an ancient well. I am going to give you an entirely new practice. Huineng's face, usually heavy with defeat. He assumed the abbot was about to hand him a shortcut, a secret he could finally understand. Go sweep the courtyard. The abbot pointed toward the slate stones blanketed in damp autumn leaves. Every morning before the sky turns gray, you will go and sweep those stones clean. Do not think, do not ask, just sweep. Huineng knelt on the damp earth and bowed deeply. He accepted the task. He believed this was merely a temporary penance, a test of his patience, and once he finished, the true teaching would finally descend. Days melted into weeks, weeks unspooled into months, and the only instruction he ever received remained those simple words, sweep the courtyard. The other clever monks began dissecting increasingly obscure, ancient scrolls. Huineng swept the falling leaves. The other monks sat with eyes closed in the meditation hall, chasing dazzling states of transcendence. Huineng swept the falling leaves. The other monks engaged in fiery verbal duels in the courtyard, their sharp intellects throwing sparks into the air. Huineng kept his head down, sweeping a layer of morning frost from the cold stones. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Time has a way of wearing down all sharp edges. The brilliantly gifted scholars of his youth had either risen to prestigious royal temples in the capital, burned out early from the relentless exhaustion of their own minds, or simply found the path too bitter and abandoned it halfway. The newly arrived novices didn't even know this temple had ever existed without Huineng and his broom. Huineng had quietly dissolved into the ambient background noise of the ancient environment. He became just like the slate stones, like the old locust tree, like the moss creeping up the stone steps. Yet, no one noticed the rhythmic, daily friction of the broom. A silent, earth-shattering shift had occurred. Huineng had stopped trying to understand. But because something far deeper, far more vast, had quietly taken over. When you face the exact same slate stone, performing the exact same physical motion for 40 years, your grasping mind eventually exhausts itself. Sweeping holds no riddles to solve. Sweeping has no philosophic. When the mind can no longer find prey to sink its teeth into, it simply, inevitably, falls silent. Huineng's hands, wrapped in thick leather like calluses, knew exactly the perfect angle to grip the bamboo better than his brain ever could. His body remembered the muscular cadence of every sweep. His central nervous system no longer needed to issue a single command. The freezing morning mist would glide across his cheek. The rough vibration of the bamboo brushing against stone would travel up his arm and anchor directly into his heart. As the sun crested the mountains, the elongated black shadows in the courtyard would inch backward. None of this required intellect to parse. These things simply, purely existed. And Huineng, entirely and without reservation, was simply there with. On a late autumn morning, the old abbot, now so frail he could barely walk, stood in the heavy shade, leaning on his wooden staff, his hair snow white. He watched Huineng in complete silence. Huineng's rhythm was flawless. There was not a trace of the anxious desire to finish quickly and rest, nor any performative urge to sweep perfectly for others to see. No fragmented thoughts. No contemplation. There was only the pure, self-sufficient Huineng. The old abbot called out with a breathy, fragile voice. Huineng paused. He slowly lifted his head, his hands resting on the worn broom handle. His eyes were like clear, freezing pools at the bottom of a deep canyon, devoid of a single trace of confusion, absent of anxiety, emptied of fear. There was only a vast, breathtaking stillness. "Tell me," the old abbot asked, posing the ultimate paradox that had broken the minds of countless brilliant scholars. "What is the true meaning of Bodhidharma's journey from the West?" It was the ultimate interrogation of the intellect. Those monks drunk on literature would have quoted scriptures, weaving beautifully ornate, fiercely logical defenses. But Huineng, the foolish monk who still couldn't recite the Heart Sutra, the old man who had known nothing but a broom for 40 years, He looked at the abbot without firing a single neuron in his brain. He simply, gently lifted his broom an inch off the ground. And then he offered an in that cinematic, slow-motion instant of the lifting broom. The old abbot understood. Huning had never intellectually grasped the concept of no mind from a dusty scroll. Instead, by sweeping stones day after day, he had entirely swept away that incessantly chattering, anxious self. Standing there now was not Huineng sweeping the floor. It was only sweeping itself, unfolding. Perfect, pure, with no ghost called the mind interfering, judging, or grasping for a destination. The white-haired abbot dropped his wooden staff, sank to his knees, and bowed deeply to his most foolish disciple. The clever monks watching from the periphery were stunned into silence. But the abbot knew a secret they could not fathom: the intellectual understanding of a thing and the direct, lived experience of it belonged to two entirely different oceans. The clever ones burn their oil down to the wick, exhausted by endless concepts. But the simplest man, anchoring himself in the most mundane physical action, allowed a heart riddled with holes to finally safely dock in absolute tranquility. Hearing this, you might feel it is just a distant, ancient fable. But let us peer beneath the surface. And I invite you to gently look inward at your own mind right now. Your brain, in this very moment, is doing exactly what those exhausted, clever scholars did. You are trying to figure everything out. You might notice yourself analyzing the logic of these sentences, evaluating whether this story is useful to you, planning tomorrow's work, and even as you listen to this audio, a part of you is distracted, judging, am I actually relaxing yet? This is the most deeply entrenched trap of human consciousness. Modern psychology and neuroscience call it the overdrive of meta-cognitive monitoring. We don't just think, we think about why we are thinking. We experience something, but simultaneously, we mount a camera in the corner of our mind to coldly observe and judge that very experience. Right now, a segment of your cerebral cortex is scanning your body like a radar. Are my muscles softening? Is my heart rate slowing down? Am I doing this right? This constant monitoring itself consumes a colossal amount of neural energy. It ensures there is always a thick pane of bulletproof glass between you and the actual experience of resting. Your mind has become a supercomputer infected by a virus, a background program named Monitor and Judge. It produces no real value, it's self-judging. Smudging a fatal wound your internal memory. No wonder you feel so heavy. No wonder your head aches and your heart races in the deep of the... More analysis won't stop the analyzing. It merely becomes the next object to be scrutinized. More relaxation techniques only add another anxious KPI to your mind's ledger. I must do this technique perfectly. So, you might just allow yourself to stop. You no longer need to use that Huineng spent 40 years proving a profoundly counterintuitive truth. Your body, your subconscious, already knows exactly how to rest. It knew how when you floated in your mother's amniotic fluid, it absolutely does not need your conscious mind barking orders. You only need to hand it a bamboo broom. Give it an incredibly simple, concrete, physical anchor, devoid of complex logic. So simple that your analytical mind can find no seam to pry open right. Now, just let go of the need to figure things out. Allow your attention, much like that heavy bamboo broom, to gently rest upon your breath. It is completely okay if it feels uneven. Just watch it. Notice the cool air brushing against the inner walls of your nose. Feel the warm air unspooling outward past your lips. Do you feel the pull of gravity? That is the earth itself. Allow your shoulders to lose their need to support the world, letting them drift downward into the depths of your bed, just like dry leaves surrendering to the wind. Let your spine soften and melt away, vertebra by vertebra. Let your eyelids become two heavy plates of lead, sealing shut against. If the mind is still producing fragmented thoughts, just let them be. There is no need to judge them. No need to obliterate them. You merely need to swing that bamboo broom in your awareness over and over. Breathe in. Notice the subtle rise of your chest. Breathe out. Allow your body to surrender into a deeper, resonant darkness. There are no riddles to solve here, no tomorrow to map out. No one you need to please or prove your worth to. You do not need to be clever. Let the sweeping rhythm of your breath brush over your frayed nerves. Drift downward, sink a little deeper, strip away the exhausting facade of strength. Your body is taking over everything now. It knows the way home. Your breath has gradually merged with the ambient sweeping sounds of that ancient courtyard. Now, riding the lingering echoes, we're going to dive into deeper, colder currents. Before drifting into profound sleep, you might need to gently face a massive shadow coiled deep within your subconscious. Know that, as you lie here, a deep, heavy sense of grievance is resting in your chest. You might be navigating an incredibly bleak chapter of your life. You have tried so hard, you have fought more desperately than anyone around you. You treat others with kindness, carefully honoring the rules of this world. Yet, why does misfortune still knock at your door? Why do those who act with malice seem to glide through life so effortlessly, while you, who only sought a quiet peace, find your hopes constantly shattered and face relentless unfairness? This is not your imagination. In countless sleepless nights, you have felt a massive, invisible, freezing net tightly cast over you. The harder you struggle, the deeper the mesh cuts. Buddhist philosophy calls this net the karmic web, that seething anger of the heavens being blind, that bitter resistance of why me. It coils around your spine like a cold serpent. Inch by inch, gnawing at your nerves. You might even let us wind the hands of time backward 1,300 years in the magnificent city of Chang'an during the Tang Dynasty. There lived a young man named Hui Yuan. He was born into the perfect beginning you might have always yearned for. His father was a renowned silk merchant, a man who spent his life accumulating virtue, funding bridges, paving roads, sheltering the destitute. Hui Yuan grew up in a sprawling courtyard estate, saturated with the scent of ancient texts and rich silk. He was shielded from hardship, his future as bright as the dawn. If destiny were a straight, predictable river, he would have married, raised children, and lived out his days in quiet prosperity. But a tidal wave of karma capsized his entire world overnight. A greedy, immensely powerful court official set his sights on the family's vast fortune. With a few forged letters and a fabricated charge of treason, Hui Yuan's father was thrown into a death row dungeon. Hui Yuan ran frantically through the city like a madman. He liquidated every asset he could, kneeling in the dirt outside the gates of relatives, friends, and officials who had once feasted on his father's generosity. Yet, all he met were tightly sealed, vermilion, lacquered doors and cold eyes that darted away in avoidance. 3 months later, news emerged from the damp, freezing prison. His father had died violently. The official documents bore only 4 cold, dismissive words. Suicide out of guilt. Immediately after, the family's entire estate was confiscated. Hui Yuan himself was locked in heavy iron shackles and exiled to Lingnan, a savage, miasma-choked wasteland where survival was a myth. He was condemned to never set foot in Chang'an again. From a brilliant, wealthy heir to an utterly destitute prisoner, the cruel strangulation of his destiny took less than half a year on the endless ancient road trudging toward Lingnan. The sky was a permanent, suffocating leaden gray. Freezing rain mixed with yellow mud filled his shredded straw sandals. The heavy wooden yoke locked around his neck rubbed his flesh raw, the wounds emitting a sickening odor in the constant dampness. Yet far more agonizing than the physical torture was the inferno raging within Hui Yuan's heart. He hated the corrupt official. He hated the relatives who threw stones while he was drowning. He clenched his teeth so hard they bled, screaming a desperate curse into the void. Is there no cause and effect in this universe? My father spent his life doing good and dies a gruesome death in a cage. Why do the wicked sit so high above us? This extreme resentment, this bitter unwillingness to accept his fate, crystallized into a literal physical weight crushing his shoulders. Every step felt like carrying a mountain. This is the heavy toll of resentment. Under the microscope of modern neuroscience, the emotions we call grievance and bitterness are never merely abstract psychological concepts. When you feel the world is unjust, when you replay the faces and actions of those who harmed you in the theater of your mind, your cerebral cortex is actively issuing highest-level combat orders to your endocrine system. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your bloodstream like a breached dam. Your sympathetic nervous system becomes violently locked in a fight or flight high-pressure state. Your body in this very moment is fighting a brutal war without smoke to defend against imaginary enemies that do not actually exist in your present room. Your muscles turn to stone, your blood vessels quietly constrict, and the power supply to your immune system is violently severed. You think you are merely thinking about the things that wounded you, but your body is enduring a very real lethal physical crushing. That young man dragging his heavy shackles through the mud is actually you, suffocating under the weight of anxiety and grievance in the dead of night. What you carry is not a wooden yoke, but a tightly held narrative of perfection and fairness. Now, I want you to draw all of your attention to the back of your neck. Gently observe that space. Do you notice a rigid, tense force pulling there? It might feel as if an invisible, heavy wooden yoke is locked across your cervical spine. Those are the muscles you have kept wired tight day and night to fight back against the unfairness of the world, to uphold a fragile facade of toughness. Allow it to be there. There is no need to fight it. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel the cold air entering your nose, sliding down your throat, expanding into your tight chest. And then breathe out. As you exhale, imagine that heavy wooden yoke at the back of your neck suddenly splintering, cracking down the middle. You do not need to solve the cruel unfairness of destiny tonight. You do not need to prove your worth tonight. In this absolutely safe, quietly shadowed space, you are allowed to finally lay down the sword you've been using to defend yourself. Take another deep breath. Drawing in that leaden, heavy exhaustion, and exhale, let the wooden yoke on your spine shatter completely. Notice how your head, losing its rigid support, sinks heavily, deeply into the pillow. Let your shoulders, like two blocks of melting ice, slide helplessly down toward the edges of the mattress. It is too heavy. That invisible backpack named grievance is simply too heavy. Right now, allow it to unspool and peel away from your shoulders. Let gravity claim your body. Surrendering, drifting further down. On the road of exile, Hui Yuan eventually collapsed. This was not the opulent Chang'an, but the miasma. Choked beast. Days of torrential rain and severe psychological torment finally shattered his fragile body. A high fever burned through his veins like wildfire. The guards, looking at the delirious young man with cold indifference, dragged him beneath a massive, moss-draped banyan tree, tossed a piece of moldy ration beside him, and walked away without looking back. Hui Yuan lay against the rough roots. His vision was a blurred, watery haze from the boiling fever. His throat felt as if he had swallowed glowing coals. Every breath was a blade. He knew he was going to die here. To die in this nameless wilderness, suffocated by endless humiliation and injustice. But exactly at this threshold, closest to death, a deeply strange phenomenon occurred. He suddenly realized he was no longer afraid. In fact, he felt a faint whisper of profound release. It is finally going to end. He no longer needed to curse that untouchable official. He no longer needed to interrogate the heavens about karma. When the massive eraser of death descends, all secular feuds, all bitterness and rage become as insignificant as dust motes dancing lazily in the amber glow. He gave up the resistance. He stopped trying to force himself to sit up. He uncurled the fingers that had been digging fiercely into the mud. He allowed the scorching heat of the fever to entirely consume him, allowed the violent vertigo to drag him down into a bottomless gorge. It was the first time in his 19 years, because he had absolutely nothing left to lose. Have you ever experienced that sensation? When you are struck with a high fever, your entire body completely limp against the mattress, unable to lift even a single finger. In that moment, you don't need to reply to anyone's messages. You don't need to meet any work quotas. You are handed the most perfect, unassailable excuse to refuse the endless demands of the entire world. Now, I invite you to return to that state of extreme vulnerability, yet absolute cocooning safety. Imagine your body temperature rising just slightly. A lazy, feverish warmth seeping out from the deep. Notice a faint, heavy sensation resting across your forehead. Feel your eyes slowly sinking inward, softening into the deep sockets. You are tired. You are so very tired. You don't need to think about today's unpleasantness. In this simulated, safe threshold of surrender, you are granted the ultimate privilege of giving everything up. Open your hands, release your grip on that invisible net. Let that warm, gently numbing tide wash over your ankles. Drift over your knees. Rise over your stomach. And cover your chest. The bed is opening its embrace, tenderly absorbing your weight. You don't have to hold yourself together anymore. You can collapse. You can melt away into this boundless, resonant darkness. Just as Huiyuan's consciousness was on the verge of scattering, about to be entirely swallowed by the black waters of death. In that hazy twilight, he heard a sound. A bell rang through the heavy miasma of Lingnan, sounding as if it echoed from the deepest reaches of the river of karma. The tone held no sorrow and no joy, only a weathered, empty clarity, driven by a final primal instinct. Huiyuan crawled, stumbling blindly toward the sound, parting the dew-soaked weeds. A dilapidated ancient temple emerged in the ashen dawn light. The wooden plaque, hanging crookedly, read, Guyuan Temple. Pushing open the groaning, rotting wooden door, he saw an old monk sitting cross-legged beneath a massive Bodhi tree in the center of the courtyard. The old monk slowly opened his eyes, looked at the mud-soaked Huiyuan, and without asking a single question, said calmly, "Benefactor, you have finally arrived." Those words twisted the rusted valve on Huiyuan's sealed heart. He collapsed onto the slate steps, pouring out all his grievances, all his furious questioning of cause and effect, carried by a flood of tears. The old monk offered no hollow comforts. He simply pointed into the distance. "On your way here, did you see a river?" "Boiling with yellow mud, incredibly foul." The old monk nodded. "That is because a violent storm just struck upstream. But did you know, after flowing for 10 miles, that same river becomes crystal clear? What you have seen is merely a tiny fragment of the river. You see your father performing good deeds in this life, yet meeting disaster. And you see the wicked committing evil, yet roaming free. But you haven't seen the distant upstream, nor the far downstream. The river of cause and effect pierces through countless lifetimes. The suffering your father endures now is paying off the debts of a distant past. The kindness he planted will inevitably bear fruit downstream. Karma is never absent. It is just that its scale vastly exceeds the short-sighted vision of your single mortal life. Hui Yuan was stunned, yet the grasping mind remained. Even so, must I just passively endure the agony of this life, battered by karma like a dead leaf? The old monk stood up and led Hui Yuan into a dimly lit main hall. In the center sat a statue of Avalokiteshvara, its gold leaf peeling away in the gloom. Yellow butter lamps trembled in the draught. Karma is not a predetermined fate. It is like a debt you owe. You can actively choose to repay it. The monk pointed, from today onward, every morning at the hour of the rabbit, you will bow your head to these slate stones 300 times. Do not chant the Buddha's name. Do not beg for protection. Do just one thing. Recall the wrongdoings you have committed against others in your life. Remember, not what others did to you. This was an unimaginably cruel, yet flawlessly precise surgical procedure on the soul. Our brains constantly operate within a defensive, self-serving bias. We habitually use a magnifying glass to scrutinize how others have harmed us, while sweeping our own coldness, arrogance, and selfishness into the blind spots of our memory. What the old monk asked Hui Yuan to do was to forcefully shut down that outward facing victim radar and turn the glaring spotlight inward toward his own shadowed corners. Hui Yuan began to bow. At first, he felt nothing but humiliation. But as his forehead repeatedly struck the freezing stone, his ego, wrapped in layers of arrogance, began to fracture. He remembered his adolescent disdain for the destitute, his haughty commands to the servants, the flash of impatience and disrespect in his eyes when his father offered guidance. A cruel thought. A cutting word, a microscopic act of arrogance. These were all toxic seeds he had planted with his own hands. Sins arise from the mind. Let the mind. It is like a farmer walking into the overgrown garden of his own mind with a torch, precisely locating the toxic weeds about to sprout and pulling them up by the roots. When you can lower your proud head and genuinely whisper, "I was wrong," from the bottom of your heart, the alarm bells ringing in your amygdala, that dead knot called karma begins to loosen and melt away. Now keep your eyes gently closed. Imagine you are also in that dim, profoundly quiet hall. The air carries the faint, resonant scent of sandalwood and aged timber. Guided by the weak, amber glow of the butter lamps, your body is slowly leaning forward. Feel your forehead. It is as if your forehead has touched that freezing, rough, yet incredibly solid and anchoring slate stone. That icy physical sensation pours into the space between your brows, instantly draining away all the scalding heat, anxiety, and chaotic chatter from your prefrontal cortex. You no longer need to play the role of a flawless human being. Before the vastness of the universe, before ancient time, it is completely okay to acknowledge your smallness, to accept your limitations, to admit that you too have unknowingly hurt others. There is no shame in this. It is a massive exhaling release of all your heavy armor. Breathe in. Feel the muscles of your back expanding outward, as if growing weightless wings breathe out. Feel your forehead, your center of gravity, sinking down toward the deepest core of the earth. All your defensive layers are peeling away from your soul like dry bark, falling to the ground. You are becoming lighter, more translucent, that hardened shell obsessed with "I am right and you are wrong" is dissolving in the soft light of the butter lamps. You don't need to fight karma, you only need to look at it, acknowledge it, and let it pass through your body. Take a deep breath in, drawing in the cool midnight air of the ancient temple. Exhale slowly, emptying out the very last trace of bitterness and resentment from your lungs. You are no longer a tightly wound, resentful victim. Your physical edges have melted into the shell. You have become an empty, sweeping draft passing through the grand hall of the temple, formless, weightless, unanchored. 100 days passed. Thick calluses had formed on Hui Yuan's forehead, but his eyes, once bloodshot and brimming with viper-like hatred, were now as deep and clear as the water in an ancient. When the final bow of the 100th day ended, Hui Yuan walked calmly out of the hall. The morning sun pierced Lingnan's perpetual fog, scattering like crushed gold across the Bodhi tree. The old monk stood in the mottled shadows, watching him as if he had been waiting 1,000 years. You have seen the seeds you planted, and you have washed the muddy water from your eyes. The old monk's voice drifted in the morning breeze, as soft as falling leaves. Now, are you ready to go to the second place? Hui Yuan lowered his head and brought his palms together. With the heavy creak of the wooden door, we will step out of that sandalwood-scented courtyard, diving toward a deeper, quieter, more desolate wilderness. Before following Hui Yuan into the deep mountains, I invite you to look at your own scarred heart. Have you ever experienced a night like this? Lying in the dark, your eyes locked onto the ceiling. You silently repeat to yourself, "I must let this go." You want to let go of a dead relationship that still emits the odor of decay. You want to let go of the person who betrayed or belittled you. You want to let go of that fatal mistake. You have read countless books on healing, heard endless advice about making peace with yourself. You have turned letting go into a mandatory KPI, grasping it as the final straw to save your exhausted shell. But what happens? The harder you forcefully tell yourself, "Do not think about it," the more HD cinematic replays of their face and their voice violently loop in your mind. The harder you try to find closure, the more your chest tightens in suffocating spasms. It feels as if your hands are gripped tight around a rough rope covered in backward, facing thorns. The harder you try to yank the rope away, the deeper the thorns tear into your flesh, leaving you bleeding. You feel desperate. You feel beyond saving. But truly, this is not your fault at all. It is the cruelest anti-gravity trap of human consciousness. After leaving Guiyuan Temple, Hui Yuan walked continuously south. For 5 full days, he ventured deep into the heart of Yuntai Mountain. It was a primeval, dead zone, devoid of human footprints. Gone were the rhythmic morning bells and evening drums of the temple. Gone was the physical labor of sweeping and carrying water. Gone was the old monk who could read his. He found a freezing damp natural cave on the face of a sheer cliff. For the first few days, he filled the hours foraging for wild fruit and searching for spring water. But once his primal survival needs were met, an unprecedented colossal sense of emptiness swallowed him whole like a black tide. In the temple, through 300 bows, he had learned to see his own malice and how to repent. But that was like excising a tumor while the wound still bled. The grasping attachments buried deep in his nerve endings, the clinging to the past, the thirst for fairness, could never be erased by. Now, in this dead, silent cave where even echoes were devoured by thick fog, he was forced to face his naked self, and the mind unanchored is always the most terrifying hell. When all external noise is forcefully muted, internal demons roar at 10 times the volume. The image of his father dying miserably in a dark cell, the sickeningly smug face of the corrupt official, the despair of his brilliant future ruined, all these things he thought he had let go in the temple, now surged back like a flock of startled bats, swarming him in the pitch black cave. Why am I still in such agony? Hui Yuan curled into a tight ball on the freezing stone. I must let go. He roared furiously in his mind, trying to use logic to drive away the thoughts. But every attempt to banish them acted as a blood transfusion, making them larger, more vivid, and invincible. He writhed in the cave, gasping for air, feeling his sanity being torn to shreds. Hui Yuan's desperate struggle in the cave perfectly mirrors your every sleepless night. Modern psychology calls it the white bear effect. When you strictly command your brain absolutely not to think of a white bear, your cortex must keep the image of the white bear active just to monitor if you are violating the rule. Trying to forcefully let go is, ironically, an act of extreme grasping. You are deploying your brain's most energy-hungry prefrontal cortex in a futile attempt to forcibly shut down the emotional limbic system. It's like driving a car at top speed while simultaneously flooring the gas pedal and frantically yanking the handbrake. There is only one outcome: a blown engine, neural spasms, and mental paralysis from massive internal friction. Letting go has never been an action you can execute. So, as you lie here in the dark, please call off this futile war. Stop issuing those cruel commands to your exhausted, brilliant mind. I must relax. I must sleep. I must let go. Those orders will only snap a nerve that is already stretched to. Right now, shift your awareness to your tightly clenched jaw. Do you notice that even while resting, your upper and lower teeth are subtly grinding, pressing together? As if you are biting down hard on some unresolved bitterness. Soften it. Allow your lower jawbone to simply naturally drop under the gentle pull of gravity. Let a tiny soft space open between your lips. Feel the air, that cool, non-judgmental air, slowly drifting through that tiny space into your mouth. Notice this current brushing past the root of your tongue, smoothing out that sour tightness in the back of your throat born from prolonged suppression. With your exhale, expel that tyrant in your mind named "How I Should Be," flushing it out of your body along with the carbon dioxide. If thoughts bubble up, If fragments of fear, anxiety, or memory flicker across the theater of your mind, do not grab at them and do not push them away. Treat them as bats occasionally fluttering through this damp, ancient cave. They fly in, they circle, and eventually they will fly out the other side. You are an ancient neutral cave. You bear no responsibility for the bats that pass through. You merely lie here, sinking into this warm bed, sinking into gravity's embrace. Drift downward, letting yourself dissolve into a soft pool of formless water. For over a month, Huiyuan struggled on the edge of mental collapse. One evening, the setting sun was the color of blood, dyeing the rolling sea of clouds over Yuntai Mountain an alarming, visceral crimson. Huiyuan sat paralyzed like a soulless husk on a moss. Covered boulder outside the cave, the mountain wind cut through his ragged robes like a blade, but he could no longer feel the cold. His hollow eyes stared into the bottomless abyss ahead. Just then, his gaze locked onto an ancient pine tree clinging to the edge of the cliff. It was a tree that had endured untold centuries of violent storms. Its trunk was violently twisted by lightning and blizzards, locked in a posture of near agonizing struggle. Yet, what was most breathtaking was that half of its branches were entirely dead, blackened like grotesque, skeletal bones, while the other half remained stubbornly, vibrantly green, stretching recklessly into the blood-red sunset. Huiyuan stared intensely at the tree. A fierce, howling canyon wind ripped past. A sharp, incredibly crisp crack echoed in the silent twilight. The thickest, most decayed dead branch on the old pine snapped naturally under the wind's pressure. It offered no wail of reluctance. It simply, quietly plummeted straight down into the unfathomable depths of the abyss. It plunged into the sea of clouds and vanished without a trace. In that fraction of a second, a bolt of lightning seemed to split the chaotic darkness deep within Huiyuan's skull. He stared fixedly at the jagged scar where the branch had broken. Suddenly, he understood. That old pine tree had never frantically screamed in its mind, "I must let go of this dead branch. I have to let it go." It deployed zero energy to push away its path. All it did was simply stop sending nutrients to the dead wood. When the nourishment ceases, when the grasping energy dissolves, time and the natural wind effortlessly complete the process of falling away. Letting go is never a proactive strike. Letting go is the natural falling away. That happens the moment you stop tight. The reason he couldn't let go of the guilt over his father's death, couldn't drop the hatred for the corrupt official, was because every single day he was using his own vital life force to water those dead branches. He had mistaken hatred for nourishment, fiercely keeping the tumors alive. Huiyuan collapsed onto the freezing boulder, burying his face deep into the soil, and let out a heart-tearing, gut-wrenching wail. This was not the crying of sorrow. This was the profound release of a soul finally pardoned after a long, agonizing execution. All his unwillingness, all his resentment, all the obsessive "I must," followed his tears, seeping into the dirt of Yuntai Mountain. He didn't decide to let go. He simply unclenched his bloodied, exhausted hands. I invite you to transform in your mind's eye into that ancient pine tree standing at the cliff's edge. Feel your spine. It is your resilient trunk rooted deeply into the core of this bed. You feel absolutely stable, totally unshakable. Slowly, imagine those anxieties that torture you day and night, the ghosts of the past that cause a dull ache, the self-blame whispering, "I didn't do enough." Imagine them as heavy dead branches growing from your body. Do not try to hack them off. Now, you only need to do one thing. Stop sending them nutrients. Draw your life force back inward, letting your warm blood flow only through your present living core. Do you feel the wind? It is the gentle breeze created by your own deep, prolonged exhales. In this tender wind, feel your right shoulder. That dead branch named anxiety naturally snaps and falls away. Notice how your right arm suddenly becomes incredibly heavy, powerless, dropping straight down, soft and limp, sinking into the abyss beneath you. Feel your left shoulder. Your left arm loses all control, resting limply at your side as if it no longer belongs to you. Then, your back, your lumbar spine, your legs. Those heavy, freezing, long-dead attachments are peeling off piece by piece, under the caress of gravity and breath. Dropping off the cliff, swallowed by the thick fog, you are becoming lighter and you are becoming heavier, light in your soul, heavy in the physical body that has completely surrendered its control. You don't need to do anything else. You have done more than enough. Even the thought of stopping the grasping can simply fall away now. Notice the faintest ambient noise in your room. Perhaps the distant roll of traffic, the low hum of an air conditioner, or just the rustle of blood moving through your eardrums. Dissolve your consciousness entirely into these sounds. You are no longer an isolated individual needing to fight the world. You are the evening mist on Yuntai Mountain. You are the breeze at the bottom of the cliff. You are that moss-covered boulder. Breathe in. The void passes through you. Breathe out. You melt into the void. There is no future. The future is an illusion that does not exist. There is only this moment. Only this extremely heavy, incredibly safe flattening. Allow the synapses in your nerves to dim, one by one, settling. Drifting toward that absolute zone of stillness where there is no light, no sound, no judgment. Months later, the first snow fell. He looked at the piercing, pure white morning light spilling through the entrance, and a thought as light as a swallow rose in his heart. It is time to descend. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew the chains of destiny had been cleanly severed. True transformation requires shedding attachments in the wild mountains, only to return to the noise of the human realm, closing the circle of life's energy with unattached kindness. But that is the story of Huiyuan's aftermath. You in this moment do not need to follow anyone. Your subconscious. Do you think you have entirely relaxed? Let us walk a bit deeper, and I ask you to peer inward with absolute honesty right now. Deep inside your skull, in that pitch black room, is there still a tiny red light blinking? That red light is the monitor in your brain. Even when you are exhausted to the bone, even when your muscles have turned to soft mud, some fragment of your consciousness remains like a dutiful, yet incredibly annoying prison guard, coldly watching your every move. It asks, "Is my breathing rhythm correct now?" It judges. Why is my left shoulder still a little tight? Did I fail at relaxing? It even worried. Modern psychology and neuroscience tell us that squandering massive amounts of life energy on self-monitoring is exactly the root of modern mental paralysis. You aren't broken, you just want to control everything too much. You try to use your brain to dictate processes your body is meant to handle naturally, and the result is that you lock yourself in an electronic straitjacket. Let us shift our gaze to the floor of a primeval sunless forest. Down here, a centipede is moving slowly across a layer of damp, cold, decaying leaves. She has 100 legs, yet her movement displays an effortless grace. These 100 legs operate in flawless harmony without a microsecond of hesitation. She is like a stream of water gliding smoothly and softly over rough rocks, crossing tangled roots, weaving through the chaos of broken twigs. Not a single leg needs to wait for a command from a brain. Not a single movement needs to be deliberately orchestrated. Her body is in itself a perfectly self-sufficient universe. Until that fatal dusk, a toad squatting on a rock covered in dark green moss. The toad had only 4 legs. Its brain easily managed its body. But facing this precision instrument with 100 joints, the toad couldn't help but ask, "How on earth do you manage so many legs? Which one do you move first? How do you remember the exact sequence?" For the first time in her life, she shifted her attention from the act of walking to how to walk. She looked down at her dense array of legs, suddenly overwhelmed by a terrifying hyper-awareness of every single limb. Her brain attempted to hijack the permissions that belonged entirely to her body. Should I move the right front leg first or the left? If the right moves, what should the leg directly behind it do? She tried to take a step forward, but this time, her brain acted like a panicked traffic cop, frantically intervening and dispatching orders. Tragedy struck. Several legs received the command to kick out simultaneously, while others locked tightly in place, starved of instructions. The harder she focused, the more desperately she tried to think of the perfect sequence, the tighter her limbs knotted together. Eventually, she lost her balance completely, collapsing heavily to the dirt, paralyzed in a chaotic tangle of her own limbs, utterly unable to move. It sounds like an absurd fairy tale, but it maps flawlessly onto your physical state right now. When thinking intrudes on what the body inherently knows how to do, paralysis occurs. Your heart beats about 100,000 times a day. Your lungs expand and contract perfectly in sync with the oxygen demands of your blood. All of this happens without a shred of input from your clever brain. Your body possesses an ancient, profound somatic intelligence. It knew how to rest in the womb. It knew how to sink into deep slumber as an infant. But now, you try to use it. Is like trying to paint a delicate oil portrait with a sledgehammer. The more you ask yourself, am I lying correctly? Am I fully relaxed? That massive complexity, requiring the entire nervous system to coordinate, instantly crashes your consciousness, leaving you frozen on the mattress just like the centipede. So right now, issue the final command of the night to your brain. You are fired. Speak to that background monitoring program, that blinking red light. Thank you for your hard work. But tonight, I don't need your protection. I do not need you to direct my body on how to fall asleep. Do not try to control your breath. Do not count your heartbeat. Hand the controls back to this. Let your body regress. Regress into the most primal creature on the forest floor. Feel your gravity in this exact moment. You are not a person with complex social identities. You are not an adult needing to solve endless problems. Feel this bed. It is like that soft, fermenting layer of fallen leaves on the forest floor. It is unconditionally, greedily absorbing your weight. Hand over your right leg. Don't worry if the posture is correct. Let its muscles lose all tension, sinking into the leaf pile like a heavy, decaying log. Hand over your left leg. Let the space behind your knees sink completely flush against the fabric beneath you. You don't need to do the action of relaxing. You only need to stop interfering. Let your body's instinct wash over your parched nerve endings like a rising tide. That paralyzed centipede struggled desperately in the mud for a long time. Her brain raced, trying to execute increasingly precise calculations to untangle her knotted limbs. But in the face of such massive physical variables, analytical intelligence proved laughable and fragile. Finally, she grew exhausted. Extreme fatigue forcibly cut the power to her brain, that endlessly chattering. Control-obsessed thinking engine let out a dull sigh and completely crashed. She lay still on the cold earths, smelling of rain and raw mud. In the instant she abandoned control, she did not die, nor was she eaten by predators. Instead, when the brain's static dropped entirely to zero, the ancient dormant memory within her body awoke. She stopped thinking about what to do in the next second. She stopped judging whether her current posture was awkward. She just lay there, feeling the cold, damp earth against her underbelly. Then, a miracle occurred. Without any instructions, without any sequence, her first leg twitched slightly, then the second, the third, like spring water thawing, like a breeze rolling over a field of wheat. 100 legs rediscovered their innate, flawless rhythm. No struggle, no friction. She once again became a silky stream, gliding silently and effortlessly into the deep cover of the leaves. Because she had finally stopped interfering with the miracle her body automatically performed. You see, when you surrender control, the world does not collapse. You do not need to forcefully direct your body. Now, hand over your breath as well. Do not breathe in and do not breathe out. Wipe these active verbs from your dictionary. You do not need to breathe. Notice the air, much like an invisible undercurrent on the forest floor, automatically and slowly rolling into your nasal passages. It is cool. It glides down your trachea, naturally pushing open your chest and abdomen. You exerted no force. The pressure of the air itself nourishes you. Carrying a trace of warmth, it empties your lungs of their final resistance. Notice your eyes, that visual organ always trying to see everything clearly to control the room. Now, let them sink slowly, heavily toward the deepest back walls of your skull. Give up the effort of looking. Let the dark drape over your retinas like thick velvet. This darkness is not empty. It is the fertile soil where all instincts are born. In this realm of absolute safety, you don't have to make any decisions. You don't have to stay awake. You don't have to stay vigilant. Keep drifting downward, sinking toward that physiological deep sea, devoid of language and logic. Let your arms slip completely out of the brain's jurisdiction. Feel them turning into two heavy rain-soaked vines, pinned heavily to the soil, unable to be lifted. Let your spine melt away, vertebra by vertebra, like an ancient giant serpent resting on the ocean floor, softening all its scales and muscles. That faint red light in your mind, the monitor endlessly asking, "Am I asleep yet?" Its power cord blinking. Blinking. Then, with a soft click completely extinguished, you no longer possess the capacity for self-monitoring. You have even forgotten that you are a human. No action needs to be executed. In the safest corner of this universe, you have achieved ultimate reconciliation with your body. The centipede has vanished into the deep leaves, returning to the smooth flow of life under the cover of darkness. You too have unlocked the electronic shackles of over-monitoring, sinking into boundless somatic peace. But if you think this is the end, you underestimate the sheer weight of a soul. When your body is entirely limp, when everyday anxieties and control have dissolved, sometimes it is in this absolute silence that the most massive extreme sorrow, buried deep in the subconscious surfaces. Before dropping into even deeper slumber, I invite you to gently gaze upon the ruins within your heart. In the long expanse of your life, have you ever experienced an absolute shattering loss? Perhaps a relationship into which you poured your entire soul eventually reached a dead end? Perhaps someone you loved beyond measure was taken by fate without warning? Or perhaps the career you took pride in, a statuses you painstakingly built? That pain is not a simple wound. It is a seismic event that demolishes your entire worldview after the disaster. Did you, like so many, subconsciously hold onto that pain in a death grip? You adopted the wounded me, the one who lost everything. You built an isolated island atop these ruins of pain, patrolling its shores day and night, refusing to let anyone close. You felt your pain was the most unique, the most incomparable sorrow in the world. You maintained this as special grief, with an almost but you didn't realize that this unique identification with suffering, this colossal energy spent keeping the identity of the mourner alive, was bleeding you dry, When the boundaries of I become incredibly rigid, the pain becomes razor sharp. Tonight, we are going to the edge of ancient India. There, we will witness a complete shattering. Only when the vessel called the Self is utterly smashed does true freedom rise, like pale smoke from a roaring fire. Yubiri was once the most admired courtesan in the city. Her beauty and grace captivated countless men. But those opulent years felt like a distant past life belonging to a stranger. Now, her entire world, every breath and heartbeat, existed for only one person, her daughter. Jiva's laughter could illuminate the darkest room. Her tiny hands fit perfectly into her mother's palm. Jiva's existence had reshaped Yubiri from a woman who valued only surface and status into a mother capable of giving pure, unconditional love. But the fever came. It was the fierce kind of fever that could burn a vibrant child to ash in mere days. Yubiri fought like a madwoman, trying everything. Healers, herbs, prayers, making desperate vows to every known ghost and god. But it was all useless. As the faint morning light filtered through the window, Yubiri felt the tiny body in her arms turn cold, inch by inch. They took Jiva to the charnel ground at the edge of the city. The place where flesh is turned to smoke and ash, returning the dead to the elements. Yubiri watched, helpless, as the orange flame swallowed her daughter's body, watching the wisp of pale smoke rise and vanish into the empty air. In that very moment, the fundamental structure holding Yubiri's life together snapped completely and permanently. She refused to leave. She became a ghost wandering this landscape of death. Jiva's ashes were already indistinguishable, mixed with the ashes and sorrow of countless others that had soaked this earth for centuries. But Yubiri paced the charnel ground every single day, stumbling blindly among the smoking pyres and grey dust. Jiva, my sweet Jiva. Her voice was torn and hoarse, her eyes like two black holes, desperately searching for the tiny white silhouette that would never return. People pointed at her, calling her the Mad Mother. Those passing by showed pity or discomfort, because her naked, overwhelming agony was too raw, too pure, terrifying every onlooker, as if stepping too close meant being devoured by a despair capable of ending the world. Day after day, month after month, she stopped eating, stopped sleeping. Her world, breaking beauty, withered like dry wood. Her clothes turned to rags. The only thing that existed was her daughter's absence. A massive, plunging black hole ripped open in her life. Yubiri had made Jiva's mother her sole identity. And when Jiva died, that identity shattered. To piece herself together from the ruins, she unconsciously forged a new one. The mother who lost everything, the most desperate of all. This is the defensive mechanism the human brain deploys in the face of extreme trauma. We try to build high walls around the pain. We maintain a monitor, experiencing the agony, while standing aside to observe and judge our own grief, to prove that I still exists. I am suffering, but I am still me. This psychological engineering, maintaining the status of I am a unique victim, requires an unimaginable toll of vital energy. But Yubiri's grief was too deep. It crushed every defensive boundary. That detached monitor disintegrated entirely Without the abstracted self standing aside, she fully, utterly dissolved into the grief itself. It sounds like the most terrifying abyss. But the teachings know that it is exactly upon these completely pulverized ruins that the most unexpected flower can bloom. Now please gently scan yourself as you lie here. In your daily life, you wear too many heavy identities. You are a good employee, a responsible parent, a dutiful child, or perhaps a deeply scarred victim. These identities are like thick, heavy layers of iron armor clamped onto your soul. Take a deep breath. Imagine the air around you floating with tiny, warm specks of ash. Exhale. And with that out-breath, allow the layer of armor called my profession to crumble into ash, drifting away into the dark. You no longer need to uphold a competent professional image. Take another deep breath. Exhale. Let the armor named my pasts peel away. The wounds you suffered, the unique misunderstood grievances you hold on to right. Now, just let go of your grip on them. Open your hands. What? Notice how your physical body begins to lose its rigid edges. Your skin is blurring into the surrounding darkness. You are no longer an individual plastered with defined labels and stories. You are merely a quiet, pulsing energy, weightless, history-less, without a past, and without a future one dawn. The Buddha walked into the charnel. He heard Yubiri's heart, shredding cries. He had heard countless such wails. It is the primal scream of a world that does not yet understand impermanence. But he walked directly toward her. On this scorched earth claimed by death, the Buddha paused. His voice carried no lofty lectures, only a compassion as vast and heavy as mountains. Yubiri. Hearing her name, the woman who had walked the razor's edge of madness for months turned in shock. It had been too long since anyone addressed her as a human being. The Buddha asked softly. The question confused Yubiri. "My daughter," she answered. Bewildered. "My daughter Jiva." The Buddha remained gentle, yet his words crashed like a boulder into stagnant water, sending out ripples that could never be stilled. In this charnel ground alone, 84,000 girls named Jiva have been burned to ash. For which one are you shedding tears? 84,000. The words hit Yubiri's chest like a heavy hammer. 84,000 daughters, 84,000 mothers, 84,000 instances of identical bottomless despair. More than that, the Buddha's voice seemed to echo across endless time. In all, if all the tears you have shed for lost children, parents, and lovers were gathered, they would form an ocean deeper than any on this earth. In that microsecond, something inside Yubiri collapsed, like the first crack of ice under the warm spring sun. She had been drowning in the tragedy of the individual. She had believed her pain was absolutely unique, building insurmountable walls out of that specialness. The Buddha wasn't trivializing her grief. He was revealing a truth. Your sorrow is not an isolated island cutting you off from the world. It is the very umbilical cord connecting you to all of humanity. Everything we love, we will eventually lose, the Buddha said. This is the very nature of existence. Every gathering ends in dispersal, every meeting ends in parting, every birth concludes with death. The world is not being cruel to you, it is simply the nature of things. For the first time in months, Yubiri stopped calling her daughter's name, standing ankle deep in the ashes. She looked around. She suddenly realized that every inch of the earth beneath her feet was saturated with the exact same love and the exact same agony she felt. She did not stop, but she finally set down the crushing identity of the inconsolable, unique victim. When the high walls of I crumbled, the pain ceased being a dagger turned inward, transforming instead into a vast, boundless ocean of compassion that held the tragedies of all mankind. In this charnel ground that destroyed everything, Yubiri discovered a profound freedom, unbound by life or death. The Buddha taught, all conditioned things are impermanent. If one observes this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Impermanence is not a cold philosophical concept. It is the gentlest antidote in the universe. It means you no longer have to hold in a death grip onto anything solid. Right now, feel the beating of your heart in this world. In this very second, there are millions of people just like you. Your pain is not isolated. It is a single drop of water in the vast ocean of shared human experience. When you return that drop to the sea, it is no longer heavy, and it will never dry up. Breathe in. Imagine drawing in the vast, inclusive expanse of the universe. Breathe out, release that isolated feeling of. In the face of impermanence, all grasping is just too exhausting. Allow yourself, in this moment, to be someone who holds on to nothing, who doesn't need to hold on to anything. Feel the breathtaking lightness of being no one. No name, no identity, no story. Keep drifting downward into the pure blackness, stripped of all labels. Your hands and feet have completely melted into the bed. Your torso has dissolved into the lightest wisp of ash in the charnel ground. Gently lifted by the night wind, drifting into a boundless night sky. No sorrow that needs explaining to the outside world, because in this vast sea of impermanence, all meetings and partings rise and fall naturally. In a grand, quiet rhythm, you simply need to rest. Upon these absolute ego-less ruins, fall into a deep slumber. Yubiri, she would always remember Jiva, but the ghost that violently clung to pain remained forever in the ashes. She no longer needed to constantly monitor her grief, nor use pain to prove her existence. When you completely drop your attachment to concepts and identities, your senses will experience an unprecedented awakening, like a blind person suddenly given sight. Before we strip away the senses into deeper realms, I want you to notice how loud and exhausted your eyes truly are. From the moment you open them each morning, a massive blizzard of visual information mercilessly pelts your optic nerves. You see countless surfaces, shapes, colors, and movements, and your brain instantly starts spinning stories for all of it. You see a face, and in a microsecond, your brain judges: is he happy or sad, trustworthy or suspicious, beautiful or plain? You see an object, and your brain immediately tags it valuable or useless, desirable or garbage. Your eyes flood you with such a colossal volume of data every day that your thinking engine can never stop interpreting, never rest from the grueling labor of making sense of everything seen. This is why, even when you close your eyes, countless images continue to frantically flash across the screen of your mind. Vision locks you tightly in a prison of concepts and judgments. Tonight, we will board up this loudest window. We are going to meet a man who lived his entire life in absolute darkness. To experience a true texture that requires neither eyes nor the brain's frantic analysis. Sona was born blind. Like all infants, he entered the world crying, breathing, hungering for milk, but his eyes never recorded light or shadow. He never distinguished his mother's face from the shade on the wall. Yet to Sona, darkness was not an absence of light. It was the default state of his world. Complete, whole, needing no comparison. While sighted children were seduced by colorful illusions, Sona constructed an incredibly rich universe through sound, touch, and subtle vibrations that sighted people could never detect. He didn't need eyes to verify. The unique cadence of footsteps told him his mother was approaching. He could distinguish his father from his brothers by the micro-shifts in their breathing. He felt the granular texture of the sun's heat settling on his skin without ever needing to see the source of the sun. His world was brimming with texture, temperature, acoustics, and sensation. A complete reality that never felt. When Sona arrived at the temple, asking to be ordained, the other monks exchanged bewildered glances. How could a blind man read the sutras? How could he practice in a world heavily reliant on sight? But the Buddha accepted him without hesitation, telling the assembly, the Dharma does not reside solely in words. It exists in direct experience. And Sona is already an intimate master of direct experience. The Buddha articulated the ultimate secret of cognition known to modern neuroscience. The vast gulf between direct perception and conceptual cognition. Vision is the most deceptive organ we possess. You see a fire, and your brain instantly triggers your language center, throwing concepts at you. Dangerous, beautiful, or useful for cooking. These concepts are layered over the raw, direct experience of light and heat. Concepts aren't wrong, but they forcefully wedge a gap between you and the. To maintain this endless stream of translation and explanation, your neurons are severely overdrawn. But Sona, due to his blindness, was forced to bypass this most energy-draining neural pathway. He navigated the world through the most primal, unmediated contact. He touched truth with zero latency. So, as you lie here in the dark, stop trying to look. Even with your eyelids closed, I invite you to completely release that lingering tight desire in your eyeballs trying to catch a glimmer of light. Feel your eye sockets, deep, warm, soft caves. Let your two eyeballs sink heavily into the deepest recesses of these caves. Unplug the connection between your optic nerve and your prefrontal cortex. Yank out the cord labeled identification. Now, gently tune into the true reality you have always possessed, the one constantly drowned out by visual noise. The moment you close your eyes, do you notice how acute your hearing suddenly becomes? Listen. Those faint ambient sounds you ignored all day are surfacing. The subtle hum of electronics, the incredibly distant murmur of voices, and your own slow-rolling ocean, like breathing. When the brain is freed from processing a visual storm, it suddenly has immense space to fully, completely receive other inputs. Breathe in. Listen to the microscopic vibration of air brushing the inside of your nose. Breathe out. Let that vibration carry away the very last trace of tension from your forehead. You don't need to figure out what is hiding in the dark. You simply need to steep yourself in the absolute safety. During his years in the temple, touch became Sona's greatest teacher. His hands, with a focus sighted people could never achieve, caressed the textures of the world. He felt the cold, polished roundness of the prayer beads, the rough grain on the wooden prayer wheels, the distinct folds of a monk's robe, and the raw living heat transferred from another's palm in greeting. Through touch, he directly apprehended impermanence. He could feel the temperature shifting throughout the day. He felt surfaces wearing down under repeated friction. He intimately felt the aging and changing of his own flesh. Without needing a single sutra to explain it, impermanence flowed right at his fingertips. Sound revealed deep patterns to him. From a footstep, he heard a person's inner confidence or hesitation. He could easily separate a genuine laugh from a polite facade. In just 3 years, Sona underwent a profound transformation that made even senior monks envious. When he sat, there was zero trace of the struggle of wanting to get somewhere or achieving a state. He was just entirely flawlessly there. His attention was never fragmented by visual mirages, never tugged away by distant movements. The Buddha recognized this state. Sona, the monk born blind, became a fully awakened arhat. He no longer manufactured unnecessary suffering. He touched the naked face of reality directly. When the other monks asked him for guidance, Sona delivered a thunderous truth. Sight might be the greatest obstacle to seeing reality. Your eyes feed you so much information that you are forever interpreting, forever restless. True insight has absolutely nothing to do with the eyes. It is a direct knowing that entirely bypasses vision and conceptual thought. Sona was right. You don't need your eyes to right now. Move your awareness from your head down to your fingertips. Feel the pads of your fingers. They are the most sensitive antennas on your body. Don't move them. In total stillness, just notice what your fingertips are touching. Is it soft cotton smooth sheets? Do not tag this. Don't say, "This is a blanket" in your mind. Simply experience the pure temperature, the microscopic friction. Let this wordless tactile sensation creep slowly up from your fingertips. Feel the weight of the fabric draping over your arms. Notice the massive supportive force of the mattress cradling your entire back. This knowing requires zero language or concepts. It is complete, instant, absolutely precise. Every inch of your skin is engaged in this direct perception right now. Feel the ambient temperature of the room on your skin. Notice the subtle tingling sensation of muscle fibers unspooling under the pull of gravity. Gather all the energy usually spent on thinking and draw it back to your skin. You don't need to think. You only need to exist. Become a quiet body connecting to the world purely through touch and sound deep in your subconscious. There is an absolute blind spot where no light can ever reach. It requires breathe in. Draw in this reassuring, thick darkness, breathe out. Expel the last surviving urge to see clearly and control. Let your torso, like an ancient wooden ship sinking to the sea floor, become totally saturated by the water. One layer and another, you have melted completely into this richly textured dark. No shape, no color, only extreme, empty tranquility. Sona touched the truest textures of the universe in the dark. By completely shutting those outward, looking eyes, you have finally tasted. But our minds are trapped not only by visual mirages, but crushed under the weight of past memories. Before crossing this next river, I need you to notice your shoulders. You are lying alone on this incredibly private, perfectly safe bed. With no one else around, is your mind currently packed with all sorts of ghosts? That boss who sharply criticized you earlier today, or days ago, or years ago? That stranger who made you feel embarrassed and trapped? That dying, decaying relationship that still caused you agony? Are any of them physically in your room right now? And yet, you carry them all on your back. You carry them as you toss and turn in the dead of night. You carry them while endlessly replaying the dialogue in your head, searching for the perfect comeback. You carry them while eating, walking, and showering, allowing these ghosts of the past to bleed dry every drop of your present life force. Our brain is like the basement of a hoarder. It frantically collects anger, shame, and fear that should have been discarded long ago, clutching them to its chest, refusing to let go. Today, we are going to a raging river to watch a young monk who, for the sake of rules and morality, carried a woman in his mind for miles. We are going to learn how to leave those bygone people and events permanently on the riverbank. On the rugged ancient pilgrimage route, two monks walked side by side, one weathered and old, the other young and strictly bound by vows. After a long trek, they reached a necessary river crossing. Because of a heavy storm upstream, the river had swelled, violently churning with muddy yellow water, moving with terrifying speed. On the muddy bank stood a young woman. She was dressed in incredibly expensive, delicate silk, looking desperately anxious at the roaring water, knowing she could never cross without destroying her garments. Under the severest monastic vows, monks are absolutely forbidden to touch women. The young monk stood far away, his eyes cast down, fiercely guarding the pure rules in his head, thinking, we who have left the world must have no entanglement with this woman of the red dust. But then, a shocking scene unfolded. The old monk didn't say a single word. He walked straight up to the woman, hoisted her onto his back, and stepped firmly into the freezing, violent, muddy water. The yellow sand tore at his robes, but his steps were solid. He carried the woman across the raging river, placed her incredibly gently on the dry grass of the opposite bank, gave a small respectful bow, and continued walking without looking back. The young monk stood frozen, so shocked his brain entirely crashed. It took him a long while before he hitched up his soaked robes, stumbled across the river, and caught up with his master. But he remained completely silent, tailing closely behind the old monk, locked in a suffocating silence. Let us look at how modern psychology and neuroscience parse the young monk's brain state in this moment. The physical event of crossing the river, the old monk picking her up, crossing, and setting her down, took perhaps 2 minutes. The actual physical contact was completely finished, but our brains possess a terrifying capacity for time travel and elongating pain. We are rarely tortured by reality itself, but by our thoughts about reality. The old monk had put the woman down, but the young monk had picked that silk-clad woman. He used his moral judgments, his shock, his internal trembling over a broken taboo to construct a never-ending crime scene within the synapses of his own brain. Right now, lying in absolute darkness, listening to my voice, move your attention to your shoulders and upper back. Do you feel it? Is there a massive cold boulder pressing down there? That is not fatigue. That is the weight of the people you have picked up in your mind today, or over the past week. You packed their words, their glares, the hurt they caused you into a heavy rucksack, and strapped it fiercely to your flesh with the ropes of attachment. Take a deep breath. Feel the current of air entering your shoulders, touching those rigid muscle fibers. You don't need to resolve those conflicts. You don't need to prove to them that you were right. In this small, safe room, they simply do not exist. Breathe out. With this long exhale, feel gravity. Feel the earth's pull acting like a warm, massive hand, prying open your fingers one by one. From that heavy rucksack, you don't have to carry them anymore. This is nothing but a holographic projection inside your skull. In reality, they vanished on the opposite bank of that muddy river a long, long time ago. They walked like this for hours along the mountain path. Mile after mile, the old monk's steps were light and steady, as if melting into the mist. The young monk, however, waded through a mental swamp with every step. An incredibly grand psychological drama was playing out in his head. Entirely, his brain was screaming. How could Master break the vows like that? What if the other monks find out? Is this a test of my loyalty? Should I report him? By just watching, am I an accomplice? These thoughts were like frantically spinning gears grinding against each other, brewing a perfect storm of judgment, confusion, self-righteousness, and crippling self-doubt. Finally, after enduring hours of internal torture, the young monk could no longer suppress his exploding nerves. He stopped and roared furiously at the old monk. How could you carry that woman? You know monks are absolutely forbidden to touch women. You broke all our vows. His angry shout echoed endlessly through the empty valley. The old monk stopped. He turned around. The mountain wind ruffled his tattered robes. There was no anger in his eyes, no defensiveness, only a deep, slightly sorrowful tenderness. He looked quietly at his young, sweating, self-tortured disciple and spoke with a voice as light as a feather, yet as heavy as a mountain. I set her down by the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her? This counter question pierced the very core of human mental mechanics. It reveals exactly how suffering is manufactured. The root of our pain is rarely the event itself, but how we process it in our thoughts. Our brains do this absurd thing every single day. We pick up worries, judgments, resentments, old scores, anticipated disasters, stuff them into our minds, and carry them for hours, days, even years, vastly outliving the physical moment itself. The sutras often say, "We are what we think." The psychologist Viktor Frankl spoke a strikingly similar truth. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. The moment the old monk set the woman down, the young monk, however, filled that space of freedom with endless agonizing thoughts. He personally pulled a poisoned arrow that had already fallen to the ground and plunged it deep into his own heart. Now, I want you to face the person you have been carrying in your mind. Do not run away in the dark. Look at their face it is nothing but a phantom stitched together by the electrical signals in your neurons. Your physical body is lying here, absolutely safe. No one is harming you in real physical space in your mind. Speak to that phantom with the old monk's incredibly calm, ripple-less voice. I set you down months ago. I set you down years ago. Breathe in, feel this incantation resonating within your chest. Exhale slowly. As you breathe out, imagine the heavy, dark doors of that crowded basement, all those old, moldy VHS tapes of memory. All the dust-covered judgments and anger are being swept entirely out of your body by a cool night breeze. You don't need to resolve the past because physically, the past is permanently dead. It only exists in your current thoughts. And you have the Let that raging, muddy river wash away all footprints. The water washes over your cerebral cortex, carrying away all the mud and attachments. You belong only to this moment now. Feel the heaviness of your back. Feel the faint pressure of the blanket resting on your chest. This is real. Your hands are slowly becoming lighter because you no longer need to grip anything so tightly. Your feet are slowly melting because you no longer need to carry anyone. As you trudge forward, anchor the heavy chain of your awareness fiercely to these next few breaths. Breathe in, the water flows past. Breathe out. There is no right or wrong left to judge, no rules left to follow. There is only this clean, entirely emptied shell, wrapped tenderly in gravity, falling continuously into a timeless abyss. Sink down, sink deeper, dissolve into this river of time that never flows backward. The young monk woke as if from a dream upon hearing his master's words. He finally dropped the ghost that had tortured him for miles. And so have you. You have left that heavy rucksack permanently on the riverbank. When you stop using your brain to grip the past, you'll find that even those uncontrollable, weather-like wandering thoughts can no longer harm you at all. Before stepping into this late autumn courtyard, I need you to quietly observe the thoughts currently rolling through your skull. Are you experiencing this kind of exhaustion as you lie on this bed, desperately craving absolute peace? Your brain acts like a runaway projector, constantly flashing images, tomorrow's work, unreplied messages, a passing thought, a baseless dread about the future. Then, you start getting irritated. You issue strict commands to yourself. Stop, don't think anymore, I must clear my mind. You try various focusing techniques, attempting to forcefully suppress the chaotic noise, trying to neatly categorize them. They are like a disturbed nest of hornets. The harder you swat, the more frantically they swarm. Eventually, your head throbs with pain. You think the wandering thoughts are making you tired, but actually, what drains your vital energy isn't the thoughts themselves. It is your endless, desperate resistance. Your attempts to control, manage, and obliterate them. You have been locked in a doomed hand-to-hand combat with the laws of nature. Today, we are going to a secluded thatched hut in deep autumn to watch a Zen master sitting quietly beneath an old maple tree. We are going to learn how to surrender this incredibly arrogant desire for control and allow those thoughts to fall naturally like autumn leaves. In the ancient past, a young novice monk carrying a painful dilemma that had tortured him for months arrived at the remote hermitage of Shitu Zen master. This young man had exhausted every ounce of his strength trying to silence his brain. He had tried every meditation technique his teachers taught, read every ancient scroll on stilling the mind, and practiced concentration until his head felt like splitting. Yet, his thoughts remained like unbroken wild horses, surging endlessly one after another, ripping his attention in all directions, offering no peace. Master, the young monk bowed deeply, his voice heavy with despair. I come to seek your guidance. No matter how hard I try, I cannot make my thoughts stop. They arise uncontrollably. What must I do to make them cease? What is the ultimate method to finally quiet my mind entirely? It was a late Shitu Zen master was not sitting on a meditation cushion, but beneath an ancient maple tree outside his hut. The massive canopy of the old tree, though the season had turned, still held many leaves dyed crimson by the autumn frost. When the young monk desperately asked his question, the master did not answer immediately. Just then, a bleak autumn wind rushed through the valley, sweeping into the courtyard and through the branches of the old maple. Pushed by the wind, several deep red leaves broke from their branches, swirling in midair. Before floating down incredibly softly, resting silently on the moss covered soil, Shitu Zen master simply watched this in silence. He watched the leaves, some falling slowly, some tumbling in the air. Finally, the master turned his gaze to the novice, who was agonizing over his inability to control his thoughts. Did you see those falling leaves? The master asked. Yes. Master, did you make them fall? No, master. The young monk paused, looking at the old tree and the ground covered in red, and answered thoughtfully. I suppose not, master. They simply fell naturally when the season shifted and the autumn wind blew. Then, while they were still on the branches, Shitu Zen master's voice carried a clarity that pierced through time. Did this tree struggle desperately to force them to stay? No. The monk answered slowly. They just rested on the tree naturally. Until it was. Shitu Zen master nodded slightly, his deep eyes like a pool of still water. Your thoughts are just like the leaves covering this tree. When the conditions are right, they appear, they linger for a while, and when the conditions are right, they naturally leave. You did not manufacture their arising, and you do not need to Trying to control your thoughts is like standing beneath this old maple tree, shouting orders at the leaves to stay on the branches, or commanding them to fall on your cue. No matter how hoarse you scream, they will only follow their own nature, paying absolutely no mind to your demands. The young monk stood frozen watching his entire practice had been built on a monumentally arrogant premise. He believed he had to do something about his thoughts. Control them, organize them, force them to behave differently than their true nature. But thoughts are not subject to control. They are simply natural reactions to conditions. The wind, the temperature, the physiological in this modern world, your brain operates the exact same way. Do you really think you can decide what you will think about in the next second? Try it. Can you decide exactly which image will pop into your head 5 minutes from now? You cannot. You might think of a word you saw today, a slight ache in your body, a sudden melody, or a subconscious. You cannot create the wind, nor manufacture the rain. You are merely experiencing their passage. You are so exhausted, not because you have thoughts, but because you are burning massive amounts of vital energy trying to control a perfectly natural process that requires zero intervention. Imagine standing under that old maple tree, desperately stretching your arms to hold the leaves on the branches. Imagine running frantically around the courtyard, trying to catch every single falling leaf in mid-air before it hits the ground. Imagine trying to restack the wind-blown leaves into neat, orderly piles. And that is exactly what you do to yourself in bed every night. So stop. Do not be the fool running madly in the autumn wind, trying to catch every leaf. Right now, bring your attention to your tight scalp. Is your scalp slightly tingling from overthinking? Imagine your skull is and those anxious thoughts. Tomorrow's work, unknown dreads, self-judgments. Are the fragile leaves clinging to the branches? Feel a cool, completely neutral autumn wind blow into your mind. When a thought arises, simply look at it. Ah, here is a leaf about anxiety. Ah, there is a leaf about planning. Do not grab them. Do not judge them. Do not tumble through the air with them. Just let them fall on their own. You are merely lying here as an incredibly vast, accommodating observer, watching these thoughts arise and watching them plunge into the boundless darkness deep within the mattress. Falling further, you don't need to do a thing. Gravity will take every single leaf. Beyond falling leaves, nature offers another supreme teacher showing us effortless existence. Water, watch how water moves. It always, eternally, seeks the lowest path. It doesn't need a brain to think. It doesn't plan or decide. It merely yields to the natural pull of gravity. When water encounters a massive, impossible boulder, what does it do? Does it get angry? Does it roar at the rock? You shouldn't be here. You are in my way. I am going to knock you over. Number, it absolutely never flows uphill. It simply, incredibly gently, incredibly submissively, slips through the cracks and flows around the sides of the stone. It flows wherever it is easiest to flow. Pour water into a round cup, and it uncomplainingly becomes a round cup. Pour it into a square bowl, and it instantly becomes a square bowl. Water completely adapts to whatever container holds it. Yet in this absolute surrender and adaptation, it never loses its fundamental soft essence as water. This is a supreme dimension of wisdom that requires zero thinking, and your exhausted brain can find salvation in water. You are drained because you are constantly locked in a death match with reality. You refuse to accept things as they are. You grit your teeth and whisper internally, "This shouldn't have happened. Things shouldn't be like this." Shooting to force water to flow uphill. You are squandering precious life force fighting gravity. Of course you are covered in bruises. Of course life feels like an unwinnable sentence of hard labor. But what if, starting tonight, you stopped swimming upstream? What if you allowed yourself to be like water, finding the lowest, most effortless path? Now, surrender all the support in your bones and muscles. Imagine yourself as you don't need to hold a shape. You don't need to maintain dignity. This soft bed is the container holding you. Feel every square inch where your back meets the mattress. Do not brace yourself. Let your flesh go completely limp, flowing outward along the dips of the mattress. Your shoulders, like water, your legs, like water, seep deeply into the fibers of the sheets under gravity's pull. If an emotion rises, if fear surfaces, that is just a rock in the riverbed. Do not crash into it. Do not say, "I can't be afraid." Just as water flows around a rock, let you simply gently envelop them, flow around them, and continue drifting toward the deepest, darkest, stillest ocean floor. Flow downward. Stop struggling. Since you cannot stop thoughts from arising, accept their existence. Since you cannot change the rocks of reality, adapt to its shape. Breathe in. You accept breathe out. You surrender all resistance. You no longer demand that things be different. You are a leaf falling with the wind. You are a drop of water flowing toward the abyss. No resistance, no depletion. Only this incredibly free, structureless descent, sinking. Endlessly sinking. Shitu Zen master sat beneath that barren maple tree, looking at the ground covered in red. He didn't control, didn't fight, didn't manufacture any unnatural action. In that absolute acceptance, you have become a pool of still water flowing downward, seeping into the dark depths of this stream. When we stop using the brain to fight nature, we can find the door to eternity within the most mundane, repetitive physical actions. Before pushing open the heavy wooden doors of this bell tower, I want you to feel just how deeply you dread repetition. Recall your daily life, washing dishes, folding clothes, commuting, preparing meals, even brushing your teeth. When you do these things, are you truly there? No, you intensely despise these dull, day-to-day repetitive actions. You feel they are eroding your life, turning your brain numb and slow. So, you start frantically escaping the present moment while doing them. You wear headphones to listen to podcasts while washing dishes. You stare down at an endless screen while commuting. You fold clothes while your mind races to plan tomorrow's meeting, worry about future bills, or replay yesterday's argument. Your physical body repeats movements it has done thousands of times, while your soul has shattered into millions of fragments, scattered across the past and the future. This absolute severing of action from attention is the very root of your exhaustion. You are never where you are. You are never truly doing what you are doing. A part of your body is always wandering, and this fragmentation, even during the simplest tasks, is frantically draining your life energy. We mistakenly believe that spiritual practice requires endless novelty, intense stimulation, and constant challenge. We think repetition is a poison that kills awareness. But tonight, we are traveling to an ancient temple named Ryoan to witness a mute monk who smashed 30 years of his life without reservation into a single mechanical action. We will learn how to gather that attention, shattered into 10,000 pieces, and anchor it into one absolute, singular physical movement to experience the soul-shaking, eternal stillness that arrives when the mind's chatter completely dries up in extreme repetition. In ancient Japan, at a temple named Ryoan-ji, there lived a monk whose entire life's meaning revolved around a single incredibly solitary task. Every day at the crack of dawn, every day as the sun sank, and at specific hours throughout the day, his job was to strike the massive ancient bronze bell of the temple. Beyond this, nothing else. He didn't have to teach students, didn't lead solemn ceremonies, didn't manage complex temple affairs, didn't even study profound sutras. Only this bell. Every day, he would climb the same steep wooden stairs into the tower, his hands gripping the rough hemp rope attached to the massive wooden striking beam. He pulled the beam back, then let gravity's momentum swing it forward, smashing it fiercely against the thick bronze surface. A deep, resonant, majestic tone would roll across the temple courtyards, over the dry landscape gardens, all the way down to the village below, marking the passage of time for everyone who heard it. This bell ringer, who left no name in history, repeated this exact motion for 30 solid years. 30 years, always the same movement, always the same sound, always those few wooden steps leading to the tower. When young novices first arrived, they often watched him with a complex mix of pity and relief. They pitied him because, in their eyes, nothing could be more mind-numbing or spiritually deadening than performing the exact. They also felt relief that they hadn't been assigned such a meaningless chore. They came here to study profound doctrines, to experience deep meditation in the Zen hall, to solve complex riddles of reality and consciousness. To them, the bell ringer was given this task simply because he was too mediocre to handle any challenging spiritual practice. But the truly wise elder monks saw a secret the newcomers completely missed. They observed the bell ringer silently for years. They noticed that his steps as he approached the bell carried an incredibly rare texture. Not rushed, not forced, and absolutely not mechanical. Despite having repeated it countless times, every single time he climbed those wooden steps, it was as if it was the first climb of his entire life. As if every step weighed as heavy as a mountain. As if this strike was the first since the birth of the universe. And the last before its end. When his hands touched the rough rope, there was not a trace of the weariness of "here we go again," nor the dismissive rush of "let's get this over with so I can rest." He gripped the rope with a silent, absolute focus, as if greeting a long-lost friend. The distance he pulled the beam back was not a fraction of an inch too much or too little. It was guided entirely by a deep marrow intuition, rather than mental calculation. Finding that perfect apex. Those young novices didn't understand. Repetition is. Modern neuroscience has a fascinating concept called transient hypofrontality, often known as the flow state, when your prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for logical analysis, self-monitoring, time perception, and anxiety, is highly active. You feel pain, boredom, and exhaustion. But if you can pour 100% of your attention without holding anything back into a physical action that requires no complex logic, a miracle happens. Your cerebral cortex is forced to shut down from extreme hyperfocus. You lose all perception of time. You lose all judgment of self. That endlessly chattering, repetition, hating brain is completely hypnotized, paralyzed by the extreme, monotonous rhythm. The bell ringer's daily action for 30 years was not numbness. It was the most extreme peak of focus human consciousness can achieve. He compressed a vast scattered universe into a single hemp rope, a wooden beam, and the strike of a bell. When there is zero resistance left, the most boring repetition becomes the shortest path to eternity. Now, lying in the dark, stop resisting this day in and day out exhaustion. Allow your body to transform into that suspended wooden beam in the bell tower. Close your eyes, focus your attention entirely on your breath. Breathing is the oldest, most repetitive, and grandest action of your life. You don't need to change it. You only need to, like the bell ringer gripping his rope, gently yet fiercely anchor your awareness to the rhythm of your breath. Feel your chest pulled slowly backward by an invisible force, like the wooden beam drawing back, filling with power. Feel the beam swing heavily forward along the arc of gravity until it releases every ounce of its force. Breathe in. Pull back, breathe out, swing forward. With every inhale, you are repeating an action done by every human being for thousands of years. With every exhale, you are utterly crushing the chaotic thoughts in your brain, trying to tear you apart. Do not expect anything new to happen in this incredibly safe abyss of the subconscious. Boredom is a supreme privilege. Radically simplify your life. Simplify it to one single inhale and one single exhale. In this extreme repetition, feel the tear, inducing relief of peeling away all complexity. Sinking following this monotonous pendulum, continuously, deeply sinking. One day, a visiting scholar renowned throughout the region came to Ryo-Ji, a master of Buddhist philosophy. He stayed for a few days, engaging in deep discussions on profound teachings and methods with the head monk. On the very morning he was to depart, he heard the dawn bell. Just that first vibration of metal anchored him to the ground. He stood motionless in the freezing dawn wind, listening until the echoes completely dissolved into dead silence in the air. "Who is ringing your bell?" The scholar turned and asked the head monk. "Just an ordinary monk here. He has been doing this chore for many years." The scholar fell silent for a moment, his voice trembling with unconcealed awe. "I wish to meet him. He was holding a bamboo rake, combing fallen leaves in the sand, and his focus on raking was exactly the same as when he struck the bell. The scholar bowed respectfully and asked, "Excuse me, how long have you been ringing the bell here?" 30 years, the bell, Ringer replied calmly. 30 years, doing the exact same work, repeating the same motion, hearing the same sound, the scholar said thoughtfully. "Tell me, do you find this practice difficult, boring? Do you ever long to do something more challenging, more meaningful?" The bell ringer paused his bamboo rake. "In the very beginning. Yes," he said honestly. "When I was first assigned this task, my brain violently resisted. I felt this menial labor was beneath me, that I had the capability to do much more important. I fantasized about the amazing spiritual heights I could reach if I could just escape this dull chore." He paused, his eyes resting on the bamboo rake in his hands. But gradually, something changed. I began to notice that when my thoughts wandered, when I was thinking of other things while striking, the tone of the bell was different. It sounded dull, hollow, lacking a certain clarity. The bell ringer looked up, his eyes as deep as ancient wells meeting the scholar's gaze. And I discovered that in those extremely rare moments, when I was totally focused on the action at hand, when the entire universe shrank down to just the hand reaching for the rope, the pull, the strike, and the echo. In those moments, my mind was astonishingly quiet. Not a dead, there was no struggle of wanting to be somewhere else, only completeness. He set down the rake and mimed pulling the rope with both hands. "Now, every single time I strike that bell, it is absolutely never a repetition," he said. "Because this specific strike, this precise level of focus, this sound tearing through the morning mist, is entirely brand new. If a thing has never happened before, how could it possibly be boring?" The scholar was deeply rooted to the spot by these words. After a long while, he let out a profound sigh. "In my many years as a scholar, I have read countless profound texts on one-pointedness, complete absorption, and living in the present. But I have never seen anyone so flawlessly turn these teachings into flesh and blood, and he never even tried to practice them." The bell ringer laughed softly. "That is the strangest part," he said. "I never tried to achieve one-pointedness. I never tried for complete absorption. And I never tried to live in the present. I just completely, without holding anything back, poured my entire life into striking that bell, and somehow, just this single, simplest physical action contained the entire universe those incredibly complex teachings point toward." That bell, Ringer struck the ancient bell roughly 30,000 times in his life. 30,000 times every single time was absolutely. He didn't write a single book, never took a disciple, never taught any special meditation technique, but he used 30 years of an extremely pure physical action to sever every single trouble the brain manufactures. Now, I ask you to do this incredibly simple thing as well. Gather all your attention fragmented into thousands of pieces in your day. Put it back from your phone screen, from tomorrow's to-do list, from the judgment of others. Pour your entire life into this moment, this very second, this exact body of yours. Don't think about how many times you've breathed or how long it will take you to fall asleep. Just like striking that ancient bell, pour your entire soul into complete. Notice how the cool air creates friction in your nose. Feel your breastbone expanding outward. This is the first breath since the birth of the universe. Without holding anything back, complete this single unique exhale right now. Notice how the warm current carries all the stale air out of you. Feel your muscles sinking deeply into This is the last breath before the end of the universe. Outside of this one action, the entire world ceases to exist. There are no complex spiritual practices, no puzzles to solve. There is only this one pull, this one strike. Listen, it is a bell echoing across time. When you pour all your attention into this single action, the shackle named time shatters completely. The past has dissolved into dead silence with the fading echo. The future is still lurking in a void that doesn't even exist. You are trapped in an eternally still yet eternally fresh. Now, feel this vibration piercing your skin, piercing your muscles, shattering the very last trace of anxiety in your cerebral cortex. Your consciousness is being stretched out, flattened. You have forgotten who you are, forgotten where you are. No chaotic thoughts can attach to it. There is only this endless, incredibly reassuring physical sinking, drifting down as the echoes fade, drifting down toward a bottomless abyss. That mute monk ringing the bell at Ryoan. G for 30 years proved a truth through the dullest repetition. Repetition is not the enemy of focus. It is a door to eternity. When you stop resisting the present, when you compress the entire universe into a single action like washing dishes, folding clothes, or breathing, you discover the ultimate answer to all complex philosophy. Your consciousness has been completely washed into an empty shell by that resonant bell. In this extreme ethereal emptiness, we will follow the river of time to the side of a Zen master named Dongshan. Before stepping into this freezing stream, I need you to quietly, with absolute honesty, examine the black hole deep inside your heart. Do you feel that you are somehow incomplete? The moment you close your eyes, does the ghost named "I am not good enough" instantly haunt you? You always feel your personality has flaws. You need to be more outgoing or more grounded. You feel your emotional management is a disaster. You need to be more rational and stop being anxious. You feel your soul is riddled with holes and you must fix this broken self through endless reading, learning, or even spiritual practice. You treat yourself as a construction site that can never be finished. Every day, you fight an exhausting war called self-improvement. You try to fill an emptiness that can never be filled, believing that if you just work hard enough, if you just find that perfect method, ultimate wisdom, or the right person, you will finally arrive at the illusory destination called. But this endless searching is precisely the culprit pushing you into the abyss. Searching creates scarcity. When you look everywhere for an antidote, you subconsciously hand your mind a lethal verdict. I am sick and I need to be saved. Tonight, we are going to a desolate, uninhabited deep mountain to witness a monk named Dongshan who spent his entire life frantically searching for enlightenment, only to see the cruelest yet most compassionate truth in a freezing stream. We are going to sever the lie that has exploited you for a lifetime. You absolutely do not need to be fixed. In ancient times, there was a monk named Dongshan who dedicated his entire life to the pursuit of enlightenment. He was like a crazed gold prospector, traveling for years from one teacher to another, trudging from temple to temple, crossing over high mountains. He was eternally searching for that elusive, ultimate understanding that would finally make him feel complete. He studied under masters who taught in silence and under great sages who passed down words. He performed unimaginably harsh meditations in dark caves by freezing rivers on isolated peaks. He read every scripture he could find, burning a vast sea of sutras into his memory, and engaged in fierce philosophical debates with other monks. He pushed himself through extreme physical exhaustion, through the dark nights of self-doubt, through countless moments of despair when he thought he was close to the truth, only to find his hands still completely empty. Where is this enlightenment? He would ask his teachers in despair. How do I find what I am looking for? Yet, no matter how hard he tried, that starving sensation of always searching clung to his bones, never leaving him. He constantly felt he was just a little bit short. That some puzzle piece was always missing. He was tortured by the agonizing intuition that perhaps everyone else had found the ultimate secret, while he was locked forever outside the gates of truth, helplessly looking in finally. Near the edge of a total mental breakdown, having exhausted all his stamina, Dongshan decided to visit one last teacher hidden in a remote mountain. If this teacher couldn't save him, he might truly spend the rest of his life cursed by this incompleteness. The journey to that mountain was agonizingly long and difficult. Dongshan walked for days through sun, blocking forests and treacherous canyons. His flesh had reached its breaking point, while his brain continued to ruthlessly torture him. What if this teacher can't help me either? What if what I've spent my life looking for doesn't exist? What if I am inherently flawed, destined to never awaken? On the final day of his journey, as he approached the peak where the teacher lived, extremely weak, a stream blocked his path. It was a windless day. The water was as clear as the void, flowing slowly, silently over the perfectly smooth pebbles at the bottom. The surface dragging his heavy legs, Dongshan stepped carefully into the stream, his bare feet feeling for solid footing on the rocks below. Cold, a bone-piercing, pure, flawless cold. The water rose past his shins. The physical, biting low temperature caused his nerves to snap sharply, and right then, as he casually lowered his head to find his next foothold, he saw something on the perfectly still surface of the water, resting like an unblemished mercury mirror. It was only his reflection. The haggard face of a monk exhausted by a long journey, smeared with mud, a pair of bloodshot eyes. There were no miracles there, no glowing visions. It was just his most ordinary face, the same one he had seen in countless bronze mirrors and ponds. But in that absolute, still microsecond, An epiphany colder and sharper than the freezing water struck his skull like lightning. With terrifying clarity, he suddenly saw exactly how absurd his lifelong quest had been. Psychology has a term called hedonic adaptation. But in spiritual pursuits, this is the spiritual bypass treadmill. We think we are seeking peace, but the very act of seeking is the greatest anxiety. As long as you are searching for something, you are constantly reinforcing a lie to your subconscious. I don't have it right now. As long as you are striving to become a better person, you are constantly validating a tragic premise. The me right now is broken, sick, and unacceptable. The act of looking for peace becomes the massive obstacle preventing you from noticing that peace is right here. Dongshan looked at the man in the water, desperately searching for enlightenment. He had scoured doctrines, temples, and the words of grand masters for his Buddha nature, completely forgetting one thing, that very awareness which was searching, asking, and crazily thirsting for enlightenment was the Buddha nature itself. He was like a man wearing glasses, running madly around the world, looking for his glasses. He searched every corner, yet failed to realize that the very tool allowing him to see the world was sitting on his nose. What he was looking for was not an object to be attained, achieved, or earned. So right now, as you lie in the dark, covered in scars, step off that treadmill called self-improvement. Notice your legs. They have run far too long chasing that illusory better self. Allow your calf muscles, just like Dongshan's legs immersed in the freezing stream, to entirely lose their strength. Let that clear. Freezing water wash away all the soreness and exhaustion deep within your knees. Take a deep breath. Gather all those frantic thoughts in your mind about how I should be and what flaws I must fix, and concentrate them in your chest. Breathe out, blow these lies along with the stale air at the bottom of your lungs completely into that stream. You do not need to be fixed because you have never truly been broken. That version of you feeling anxious in the dead of night, that version of you feeling like a failure, that version of you craving love and peace. Look at that, that awareness that can perceive all this pain, that presence quietly watching everything in the dark. It has never been wounded. It has never had a single flaw. Stop looking outward. Stop reaching out with begging hands. In this incredibly safe night, you just need to lean back and fall into that perfect reflection that has belonged to you all along. In that moment, standing ankle deep in the freezing stream, staring at his own face, Dongshan's decades of grueling travel and desperate searching collapsed instantly, not because the years of searching were a waste of time, but because what he had been desperately seeking had not been absent for a single second. There was no enlightenment to be found, because awareness was already present. There was no wholeness to achieve, because he was never truly broken. He neither stepped forward to find the teacher on the mountain, nor turned back, because there was nowhere left to go, and no need to go anywhere. Nothing was missing. When he eventually ambled up to the peak to visit the old master, he calmly recounted The wrinkled Zen master looked at him, offered a deeply compassionate smile, and said, "You have finally stopped looking for the seeker. You have finally seen that the one desperately searching for Buddha. Nature is precisely Buddha. Nature looking for itself, but this truth you had to see for yourself on the water. In his later years, Dongshan himself became a great grand master. When young novices with bloodshot eyes, filled with anxiety and scarcity, came begging him for a shortcut to enlightenment, he would sometimes lead them to the edge of a stream and ask them to look down at the water. "Only my reflection," the novices always answered. "Keep looking," Dongshan would whisper. Occasionally, after staring for a long time, a novice would shudder, suddenly grasping the cruel yet gentle truth Dongshan had learned years ago. Is the ultimate answer to the question. When they stopped looking elsewhere and merely recognized the very self that was looking, that grueling lifelong journey ended right then and there. This is perhaps the most exhausting, yet beautiful irony of human spiritual exploration. You already are the person you are searching for, but it is precisely your frantic act of searching that blinds your eyes, preventing you from recognizing yourself. You are already home, but you are frantically planning in your head how to get home. You are already whole, but you are picking up pieces others discarded, trying. The Buddha once said, "All beings inherently possess Buddha. Nature, just as the nature of ice is water. Without water, there is no ice. Without sentient beings, there is no Buddha." You do not need to destroy the ice block to get water. Ice, you do not need to destroy this flawed, anxious self in exchange for an illusory, enlightened self. You merely need to recognize that your totality right now. Even the awareness that feels exhausted right now is the purest, most perfect wholeness. The moment that frantic search engine stops, you don't need any cosmic visions of golden light or bliss. It is exactly like Dongshan looking down and seeing his own face. So obvious, so utterly ordinary, so unquestionable. Now, I want you to gaze deeply into the water mirror of your subconscious. Look at those heavy labels you've slapped onto yourself. I am an anxious person. I am unsuccessful. I am someone who can never cure their procrastination. These labels are just foam floating on the water's surface. Use this crisp breath of air you just drew in to blow the foam away. Exhale. Watch those labels distort and dissolve in the ripples. You are not those labels. You are also not the hard-working person trying to peel them off. You are the water mirror itself, clear, all-encompassing, undiminished by the ugliness of any reflection, and unenhanced by the beauty of any reflection, absolute awareness. Let this massive wave of relief, this "I am already whole," flow through every blood vessel like freezing water. You do not need to fix the dark sides of your personality. In this room, in this moment, you can unapologetically, without a shred of guilt, accept all your present terribleness and brokenness. Because beneath that so-called brokenness, your base layer is eternal wholeness. The longest journey ends exactly where it began, not because you wasted time running in circles, but because you finally recognized that the destination you crossed mountains and rivers to find never existed anywhere else. Feel your back. It has completely merged with this water. Mirror. Feel your cheeks. The muscle, that facial expression trying to surge, has been completely smoothed out. The ghost named scarcity has evaporated completely from the water. Breathe in the water, mirror envelops you, breathe out. You are this pool of still water. No drifting down, melting into this absolute, still reflection. Sinking ever deeper. Bongshan saw his true face in the freezing stream, and his exhausted heart finally stopped its frantic beating. You have stepped off the treadmill of self-improvement and dissolved into this absolutely whole void. When we finally end all our seeking, when we stop piling up language and concepts, we will welcome the final puzzle piece of this subconscious journey. Before scaling this peak named Vulture Peak, I need you to feel exactly how much weight of words your brain is currently carrying. Look back at your day from morning to night. You were bombarded by endless words, language, concepts, and explanations. You read messages, you replied to emails, you explained your thoughts to others, you tried to comprehend every complex concept the world threw at you. Language is our tool for survival, but this tool has also become the cage that locks us in tight. Do you feel that everything must have an explanation? When you encounter pain, you must untangle a clear logic in your brain. Why did this happen? Whose fault is it? How do I fix it? When you feel anxious, you immediately start frantically searching your mental database of psychological terms, trying to stick a precise label on your anxiety. But language consumes a colossal amount of energy. Every single word requires complex neural processing. Every sentence must be parsed, understood, and embedded into your existing cognitive framework. Every single instance of silent self-talk in your head is furiously draining your life force. When your brain is stuffed with concepts, when your world is plastered with word labels, a thick, impenetrable pane of bulletproof glass stands between you and reality. Tonight is the final stop on this long journey. We are going to that towering Vulture Peak to witness a grand assembly where not a single word was spoken, to experience the soul. Trembling, absolute silence that arises when all words, logic, and explanations crumble into dust in an instant. In ancient India, 2.5 millennia ago, there was a mountain revered as sacred by seekers of truth. Vulture Peak, on that day, a massively grand assembly was taking place. Tens of thousands of monks in earth. Toned and saffron robes sat neatly arrayed across the slopes, their heads tilted slightly upward. Their faces etched with intense hunger and the air itself seemed to hold its breath, anticipating the monumental lecture on the nature of reality and ultimate liberation that the awakened one, the Buddha, was about to deliver. Everyone was ready. The scribes had prepared their parchment, ready to record every sacred syllable spilling from the Buddha's lips. The senior disciples leaned forward, the gears in their minds spinning at top speed, ready to interject with the most penetrating, complex philosophical questions. The youngest novices gripped their notes tightly, terrified of missing a single concept that might trigger their grand awakening. 10,000 pairs of eyes. 10,000 intensely starving brains, ready to swallow the Buddha's words whole and process them into yet another artifact in their intellectual vaults. The Buddha slowly sat on the teaching dais. The entire mountain fell into a suffocating silence. However, the Buddha did not open his mouth. He simply reached to the side of his seat and picked up a single white lotus flower, freshly plucked from a pond. He held the flower up, turning it incredibly slowly between his fingertips, allowing everyone in the vast crowd to see it from every angle. And then, the Buddha just sat there in silence, holding the flower. His eyes were tender and unfathomably deep. A microscopic, gentle smile resting on his lips. Silence spread across the peak. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. The tens of thousands of listeners began to grow restless, shifting uncomfortably on their cushions. What does this mean? The lecture will surely begin any moment. 5 minutes. 10 minutes passed. The crowd began to turn frantic. 10,000 brains began to roar deafeningly in this maddening dead silence. They were frantically extracting meaning. They were trying to does the flower represent purity, or that one can bloom holy even from the mud? He must be teaching impermanence. The flower will eventually wither and die. No, the petals represent the noble eightfold path. On this absolutely silent peak, tens of thousands of brains were generating an ear-splitting clamor. They were frantically constructing frameworks, frantically dismembering, translating, and twisting this living, breathing flower into cold, dead vocabulary words, stuffing them into their mental filing cabinets labeled spiritual knowledge. Yet, amidst this sprawling intellectual carnival and neural anxiety, in this massive ocean of people, one person smiled. It was Mahakasyapa sitting in the third row. He sat quietly, looking at the flower in the Buddha's hand, and suddenly broke into a serene smile. It was absolutely not the smile of someone who had solved the riddle with intellectual superiority. It was the smile of someone who, entirely free from the interference of thought, totally absent of the need to explain, directly saw something. A smile radiating profound purity and wholeness. The Buddha saw Kasyapa's smile. He nodded gently, delivering the only sentence of the entire assembly. I possess the true Dharma I, the marvelous mind of Nirvana, the true form of the formless, the subtle Dharma gate that does not rest on words or letters, but is a special transmission outside the scriptures. This I entrust to Mahakasyapa. The crowd was stunned. What just happened? What did Kasyapa understand that they missed? Everyone was looking at the exact same flower, listening to the exact same silence. But this is precisely the core secret. Nothing needed to be translated into concepts, while everyone else was going mad, trying to use their brains to understand what the flower meant. All Kasyapa did was completely, defenselessly meet the flower. He saw the white petals, the golden stamens, the green stem, no words, no concepts. no exhausting labor of translating experience into explanation. In that direct encounter that bypassed the language centers entirely, Kasyapa touched the ultimate realm the Buddha was truly pointing toward. Language is a cruel meat grinder. Even right now, these very words entering your eardrums are forcing your brain to run complex computations and parsing algorithms. You can read 100 gorgeous adjectives describing the sweet and tart taste of an apple, but those words can never replace the direct living experience of that split second when your teeth crunch into the fruit. The experience itself exists completely outside of language. It is direct, instant, absolutely whole, requiring not a single syllable to exist. The Buddha could have spoken endlessly for 3 days and nights, explaining the symbolic meaning of the white lotus, giving the monks enough material to debate for decades. But he didn't, because some truths, once they fall into the trap of words, instantly lose their original face. You are so exhausted because your life is stuffed full of words and explanations. Even when you try to relax, your mind is silently muttering. You are using words to run a live broadcast of your experience, and this broadcasting itself violently rips you out of the deepest core of the present moment. So right now, as this grand dream nears its destination, I want you to pull the plug labeled language in your brain. Do not try to understand a single word I am saying. Let these sounds merely become waves of pitch and tone, like the sound of the wind, like the sound of the ocean waves. There is no need to parse their meaning. Now, if your mind is still throwing up thoughts constructed of words, look at those words. Imagine they are carved from. With this deep, slow inhale, a massive wave of heat floods your cerebral cortex. Look, the words are melting. They turn into a puddle of meaningless water and instantly evaporate. Not a single sentence needs to be formed. You feel the temperature of the sheets. Don't say "this is warm" in your head. Just feel that temperature. You hear the ambient noise in the distance. Don't try to decipher if it is traffic or wind. Just feel the vibration of sound waves hitting your eardrums regress. Regress infinitely back toward that wordless state of infancy. In this absolute wordlessness, that dew-covered white lotus quietly blooms in the dark. It asks nothing of you, it merely exists. And you don't need to do a single thing either. You simply need to, like the flower, quietly. Now, allow your senses to shut down, layer by layer, cut the power to your vision. The darkness becomes incredibly thick, like the softest black velvet, tightly wrapping your eyeballs. There is no past here, no future, no spatial boundaries. Cut the power to your hearing. Sound receding to the edge of the universe, tens of thousands of light years away, leaving only a profoundly reassuring, womb-like hum in your ears. Cut the power to your touch. Your bones, your muscles, your blood are losing all their density and weight. You are no longer a human shell. You are that empty mountain peak. You are that white lotus that needs no name. You have dissolved into a weightless speck of dust, drifting into an endless abyss, in a final infinitely long freefall. sinking deeper and deeper, farther and farther. The longest journey has finally ended. You walked so far, suffered so much, only to recognize in this moment the peace you searched so desperately for never existed anywhere else. All karma, all struggles, all masks, all attachments, all crumble to dust before this flower. Within that frantically thinking brain, that machine eternally anxious and forever monitoring, has finally let out its last faint sigh, and then forever it rests. The mind rests. Only peace remains. Sleep